Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad you were able to join us today for the Madison Public Library Summer Seminar Series. This is a popular summer library event. This is its 36th year, and it's organized by a committee of volunteers and library staff. Even though this is its 36th year, I can say that this is the first time we've ever been on Zoom. So welcome to the inaugural Zoom Summer Seminar Series. The series offers a range of topics of general interest, including politics, foreign affairs, current events, history, literature, sports, travel, culture, science, and health. And so I'm so pleased today to be able to introduce you to Christina Lavner. She is a registered dietitian that supports the Summit Medical Group's Oncology, Hematology team in Florham Park. Christina has worked as a registered dietitian since 2001. She has extensive clinical experience covering a variety of medical conditions, including cardiovascular disease, GI disorders, kidney disease, and weight management. And for the past several years, she has focused on cancer prevention, treatment, and healthy survivorship. She feels that nutrition is a critical way of achieving an overall healthy lifestyle. I feel you need to take the whole person into consideration when making a healthy eating plan. It's not just what we eat, but why we eat it. So I'm so pleased to welcome Christina here with us today to talk about the benefits of eating an anti-inflammatory diet. We're going to be holding questions and answers until the end, and then you can put them in the chat box. Okay, so without further ado, Christina, you can unmute yourself.
There we go. Okay. Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. Again, I'm Christina Lavner. I work here with the Oncology team in Florham Park. And we're going to be talking today about an anti-inflammatory diet. Now, I talk from a cancer prevention standpoint because that's what I really focus on, but this diet is really healthy for any disease state. We know that chronic inflammation leads to disease development, so we really want to make sure that we're eating this to be healthy, not just for cancer prevention, but to be healthy overall for any disease. Now, when we hear anti-inflammatory, you also may hear plant-based, you may also hear Mediterranean. They all are the same, basically the same thing. Everybody likes to put their spin to it. But really, it's just focusing on more of the fruits and the vegetables. And so they all can be interchangeable in the terms, just so we're clear on that, okay? So let's get started. Now, also, my presentation is made for in-person presentations, so we're going to make this work. So we're going to start with a little quiz. And the first question, it says, does eating a Mediterranean diet or a plant-based diet mean that I have to only eat Italian or Greek dishes? So the answer to that is no. It's not really, the diet is not just the diet, it's the pattern of eating that offers the protective health potentials. And we want to avoid adult weight gain and prevent metabolic change that leads to disease development. And that's what the key is. I don't like when we talk about diet, and you're going to hear me say this multiple times, a diet indicates that there's a beginning and an end. This is not like, oh, we're going to do this for 3 months and then we're going to go back to eating the way we were eating before. This is for the long term, and this is for a long-term survival, long-term healthy, overall healthy lifestyle. So, but we'll get more into that a little later. So does eating a Mediterranean diet or a plant-based diet or anti-inflammatory diet mean that you have to become vegetarian? No. The goal is to change the way we think about protein, but also to increase the fiber in our diet. And we're going to talk about that in another slide a little bit later. But so often, when we hear, if everyone can see this plate, so often the protein, we put protein over here. And protein is always the main part of the meal, usually the main focus of the meal. And it's a change in the way we think about protein. Really, we have to think of protein as more of a side dish, and vegetables should always be on this side of the plate, at least half of our plate, if not 3/4 of our plate. And then the protein can be a little bit bigger. So it's just a shift in the way we think about protein, because we do know that when we eat a high protein diet or a high animal-based protein diet, that leads to increased inflammation. So we really need to decrease the amount of animal protein that we have in our diet, or, to change our focus of it. Protein is important. I'm not going to say it's not important, but we'll talk about that later. So does eating a Mediterranean diet or a plant-based diet means I have to have no flavor in my food? No, not at all. Actually, spices are not only delicious, but they're so healthy for us when we eat them. So turmeric, ginger, garlic, all those great spices are very good for us, but we need to use them in our food when we eat them. When they're capsulized and when we take them in a concentrated form, research is showing that that does more damage than good. So it outweighs the benefit of eating these types of things, of spices. We want to make sure we have them, that they're naturally occurring in our diet. Okay. So is eating green vegetables like kale, broccoli, spinach, or other green vegetables better than other vegetables? The answer is no. And then this is a very important topic that we're going to talk a little bit later, but it's the combination. So not one veggie is not more important than another. It's the combination of eating a variety of fruits and vegetables that create a synergistic effect to make our body as healthy as possible. And this all goes back to our gut, and we're going to talk about that in detail a little bit later. Is diet more important than exercise into preventing cancer or other diseases? The answer is no. Exercise plays a key role in healthy survivorship in any state. They've done a recent study that just by adding exercise alone, they added exercise. They didn't change anyone's diet. And that they found that just adding exercise, daily exercise, decreased 17 different cancers by 50 to 55%. We are meant to move. We need to move naturally, as you may hear it be called. And everyone's exercise level is going to be different. My exercise level is going to be different than the next person, who's not different than the next person. And it's really not the necessary that we have to go out and join a gym. Well, not that you can go out and join a gym, but and go out. We want to just start moving. We need to move in our everyday life. So there's a few things that we do need to talk about when we talk about cancer prevention going forward. And the first one is, like I said earlier, is that any diet you choose, we need to be sustainable for the rest of your life. So when we talk about diet, it has a beginning, it has an end. So when that ends, what do you do? So we want to make sure that this is something, a life that we're going into and we are going to do for the long haul. 2 is exercise can be considered medicine, not torture. Now, it's actually a funny thing. My daughter and I, this past weekend, went out for a walk, and at one point she's like, "I think you're trying to kill me." She starts like screaming in the middle of the street. And, it's really, we need to move, and we have to consider that actually a privilege that we can move and that we are able to make our bodies as healthy as possible. No food can cure cancer. That is a very big one. Eating a healthy diet, eating your plant-based diet is extremely important, but unfortunately we can't cure any disease with food. We can only make our body as healthy as possible so we can fight off the disease. Now this last one, this is a big one, especially in today's world, in today's COVID, world that we're quarantining, where we're being separated so much. Food keeps us healthy, but it's our mental emotional state that plays a huge role in our health. Okay, and especially in today's world, it's very important that we do recognize that we honor our emotional state. I know that there is a behavioral health department here at Summit Medical Group that offers lots of resources. I mean, I'm not going to talk about this really as much, but just be aware that there are resources out there if you do need any support. Okay, so how do I implement a plant-based diet or an anti-inflammatory diet? It's really the same thing. So first, number 1 is it's not just about the food, it's why we eat it. We can't think of this as another diet. Okay, now I'm going to do this diet. No, this is like a commitment that we're making to ourselves, a commitment that we are allowing us to be as healthy as possible, that we're taking the time, we're making the investment in ourselves so we can live as long and healthy as possible. So number 2, is to get rid of those processed foods. Now, this is everyone's like, yeah, it's a, know this one, but we want to focus in on that fiber. We want to increase the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains. And we definitely want to decrease all that white flour, the cakes, the candies, the cookies, the processed foods in our diet. If we look at a grocery store, all the foods that we actually need are on the outside aisles of the grocery store. When you first walk into the grocery store, at least my grocery store, you walk into the produce section. So you have all your produce right there, your fruits and your vegetables, and then you move into the fish department, into the protein, the meat departments, and then you can go around to the dairy. And really, that's all we really need. So all the processed foods are going to be in the aisles. So anything that's made to stay on the shelf for a long period of time is going to be a processed food. So we really do want to make sure that we are cutting as much of that out of our diet as possible. But if we are going to use something that's going to be processed, we want to make sure that it has higher amount of fiber in it and as least processed as possible. That's very hard to say. So, okay. And now we want to increase healthy fat. So I'm going to have my first prop here. So this is 5 pounds of fat. Hopefully you guys can see this. There's different kinds of fat. There's saturated fat and there's monounsaturated fats. So monounsaturated fats are the olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds. They're healthy fat that our body can use. If you look at the fat at the molecular structure, it actually has a place on the fat that we can get in and break that fat down and use that fat. Our body can use it to do heart healthy things like transport fat soluble vitamins, use for the concentration gradient of cells, like different things. There's saturated fat, that's what this is. This type of fat is anything that's going to be a fat that's going to be solid at room temperature. So something like lard, butter, anything that will maintain its state, staying out of the refrigerator as a solid, is a saturated fat. And that's because it's a complete molecule. And our body, there's no place for this type of fat, for our body to get in and break this type of fat down. So when we eat this type of fat, we store it. So our body can't break it down. So some goes to our heart, some goes to our liver, some goes to wherever you store your fat. And so we have no choice but to store it. So this is giving us no benefit when we eat this type of fat. So we definitely want to stick with the fat that's going to give us benefit, but we want to make sure we're not eating too much of that kind of fat. We do need a little fat, but we don't need to go uber overboard with it. Number 4 is reduce the amount of red meat in our diet, increase the fish and the non-meat protein sources. The American Institute of Cancer Research and the World Health Organization work together, and they come out with new recommendations about every 2 years of your best cancer prevention. One of the recommendations that they came out just recently is to increase your non-meat protein sources. So to have a vegetarian day, one vegetarian meal a week. So that means beans, tofu, tempeh, all those kinds of sources. Again, we're increasing them, but it's still only that quarter of our plate. Okay, we want to make sure, or maybe 3/4 of the plate, but we don't want it more than that. So it's important because red meat, if you look at the research on red meat, it's not, if you eat a high red meat diet, meaning like every single day, it's not if you get colon cancer, it's when. So it's really, really important that we do cut that back. I prefer my patients, sometimes, eating red meat once a week might be a big change for people. If that's great. If you can eat it less than that, that's even better. But we have to make small changes, make it realistic. Okay, now this is probably the most important slide. Number 5 is eat the colors of the rainbow. The different colors of fruits and vegetables represent a variety of different protective compounds they offer. So the more color on your plate is the more abundant the nutrients are. Now this goes back to the research on the human biome that's coming out. Our gut, it all goes back to our gut. Our gut has to be healthy. So in our gut, we know that there's 100 trillion different types of bacteria. We need all that type of bacteria because that's what keeps our body healthy. So that's called probiotics, okay? So we know that as probiotic, healthy bacteria. Now, what feeds that probiotic, or what keeps that probiotic healthy? That's prebiotics. Now, what are prebiotics? Prebiotics are fruits and vegetables. So fruits and vegetables, when we eat them, feed that prebiotic, feeds the probiotic, the healthy gut flora, and that keeps all our gut healthy. Now, if we only go narrow and deep on, let's say, the greens, and we only eat green vegetables, and we eat a lot of green vegetables, that's great. That means you're only feeding that type of bacteria. We need to eat like the colors of the rainbow. So this way, when we eat more color and we have more color on our plate, that means that we are feeding more bacteria in our gut. So the more color represents more healthy bacteria, and the healthier our gut is all around, because we need all that bacteria to be healthy, not just some of the bacteria. And I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so it's really, really important that we do eat that colors of the rainbow. Okay, here we go. So I feel like even though salt, or skip the salt, okay, we want to use different spices and herbs to season our food. Like I said, turmeric and ginger and garlic, rosemary, basil, oregano, you name it, whatever it is, as long as it's not salt. Salt is in everything we eat, especially for processed foods. For processed foods, salt is a preservative. It makes things taste good, but it also is a preservative. It's made to keep things on the shelf longer, so it has a higher, expiration date. So I'm going to show you a couple things here. So this is the average American intake of salt. I hope everyone can see that. It's kind of hard to see it on camera. So this is how much the average American consumes. This is what the recommendation is, or how much you should be consuming, right? What is the recommendation, and how much we eat. And hopefully you guys can see that. Can you see that? And how the difference, but this is how much we actually need. So, this is a lot different than how much we're eating. And we don't need a lot of salt. We do need some salt, absolutely. But we don't need as much as we already are eating. And if you think of salt like a sponge, you put a sponge into water, what happens? It expands and holds onto the fluid, correct? So you think about that when we eat that. So when we eat salt, water is going to follow, and now we're going to hold onto that fluid on our soft tissue. And if our heart has an issue beating, whatever might be going on in our health, but if your heart is already having a hard time beating and is working pretty hard, just at baseline, now we add all this extra fluid. If you've ever swam or had the resistance of water, all that resistance now is on top of your heart that's already having an issue beating. Now we put all that extra resistance on top of it. Now it has to work that much harder to do what it has to do. So salt is a critical thing that we have to cut out of our diets. And we eat way too much salt. And like I said, salt does make things taste good, but we have to kind of get creative and use other spices to season our food. So it's very, very important. Okay, number 7, drinking water. So, I can't tell you how many times I hear people, I say, when I meet with people, I'm like, how much water do you drink? Oh, I drink a lot. All right, but how much? Like, quantify it for me. And, what people don't realize is that the new recommendations are half your body weight in ounces of water. So, example, if you're 100 pounds, it would be 50 ounces. If you're 200 pounds, it's 100 ounces of water a day. Now, sometimes those numbers can be a little staggering, especially if you're not drinking that much fluid. And to go from drinking maybe a couple of cups of water a day to 100 ounces a day might be overwhelming. So I do try to stick with a good old 64 ounces a day. That's a great starting point for most people, and to try to get in the fluid. And actually, I do have my big Dunkin' Donuts cup. This is about 64 ounces. So for the day. Somebody asked me the other day if it was filled with coffee, and it's not filled with coffee, it's filled with water, but this is about 64 ounces, or 4 water bottles would be about 64 ounces, regular size water bottles. So number 8, I include the slide about drinking wine and alcohol So the recommendation is, by the American Heart Association is no more than 2 glasses for men a day and 1 glass for women. But according to the American Institute of Cancer Research and Cancer Prevention is no alcohol. Now this is a conversation for you to have with your doctor, especially if you're on different medications or if you have different disease states, or, it's a conversation that you should have, and always ask your doctor, if you're on medication, how much alcohol you should be drinking. But if you aren't on any medication, you're otherwise healthy, it's really no more than 2 for men and 1 for women. Number 9, take small steps. So this is a big one, even though it says small steps. Everybody wants to be perfect tomorrow. It's like everybody who joins the gym in January, they go every single day. By, March, they're done. This is not something we're going to do. Again, this is for the long haul. This isn't a short-term fix. This is something that we need to keep working at, and we don't have to be perfect tomorrow. So we don't have to be extreme, and we don't have to be perfect. This is life, and life happens, and you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And I always say it's not the one meal that gets you, it's the consistency of what you do over time. So we do want to make sure we're taking small steps and that we're working towards our goal of eventually getting to be close to doing everything right. I don't want to use the perfect word, but being close to doing everything right. So now, information overload. Doing the right thing is confusing. And I can't tell you how many of my patients come in and are like, well, I Googled this and I Googled that, and Dr. Google is going to be the death of me, I tell you. But the one thing you need to know is that 90% of the information about health and health claims on the internet are based on someone's opinion or something somebody made up to sell a product. Okay, so everything on the internet is not true. It's very, very important that we have reputable sources of where you're getting your information from, and to make sure that we really know that the advice that we're doing or taking, or the changes that we're doing, are coming from someone that actually has medical background and information. Okay, so this is the realistic, this is what I was saying before about the small steps, realistic changes. So to say I'm never eating carbs again, well, that's probably not so realistic. So maybe, or trying to cut out processed foods, or maybe instead of starting small, instead of getting French fries, try for a baked potato, or even instead of getting a baked potato, order a side of vegetables. Most restaurants, if you are out, or you're able to do it, they will offer a side of vegetables. They don't necessarily advertise it, but they do offer it. So these are small little changes that we can do, especially when we're home. Maybe you can, now that you might not be dining out as much, we can try to challenge ourselves to buy a new vegetable in the grocery store and make that, maybe that's your challenge for the week, is to try to find a great recipe to make Swiss chard, or to make something that you've never eaten before. Okay, exercise is medicine. So this is important when we talk about weight loss. We want to add as much exercise in as possible. We want to do this. We want to move naturally. We definitely want to work out and do a formal exercise program as well. But the whole point is to prevent weight gain that will prevent metabolic changes in the long run. So as we age, especially for women, after age 35, we start losing 1 pound of muscle a year. And it's not like we just lose it and it goes away. It actually gets replaced with fat. So if we're not working really hard to maintain our lean mass and our muscle mass, we're going to increase fat mass. And so a muscle, this is 5 pounds of muscle. It's different than our 5 pounds of fat. So you see the muscle is smaller and leaner. The fat is bigger and not lean. And it takes about 9 calories to just maintain the state of muscle. Your muscle is burning 9 calories an hour just to maintain its state. And fat is burning 3 calories an hour to maintain its state. So you're just at your resting basal metabolic rate, you're burning more calories by just breathing if you have more lean mass. So we want to make sure that we are building lean mass and that we're intentionally doing weight-resistant exercise. And that's very, very important. So the next slide is when we see, so now as we age, if we're losing muscle and we're gaining fat mass, and now we're not exercising and we haven't changed the way our diet hasn't changed, that's going to lead towards adult weight gain or difficulty losing weight and keeping it off. So we'll have adult weight gain, increases metabolic change, which increases cancer risk. So the thing we know is that as we age, we are losing lean mass, and we're gaining fat mass if we're not working to keep it off. But also recent studies came out, the way we uptake fat through our lifespan stays the same. After menopause for women, or after we get to a certain age, the way we release fat or get rid of fat gets cut in half. So I always say it's like the trifecta of doom. We have more fat mass, we're still uptaking fat the same way, but the way we're getting rid of fat or releasing fat is cut in half. So it's really a scary and a challenging time to how to handle that. And one of the only ways we can do that is by maintaining lean mass and doing weight-resistant exercise. It's very, very important. Okay, so healthy fat, not high fat. Like I said before, I know keto has gotten a lot of press out there. And it's funny because when I was in my internship at New York Presbyterian, Weill Cornell in the city, we would rotate through different rotations. And we had a research rotation, and I had a glioblastoma patient who's a very aggressive form of brain cancer. And we were doing a keto diet for this patient. And we had a beautiful test kitchen to do this in. And it was so hard to do that I really was like, I have to say research is not my thing, but it was really, really hard to do. And now now everybody and their brother's doing keto, which is, I find it, I'm like, wow, that's really either really dumb or they're not really doing keto and they're just eating higher fat foods. So we have to make sure that we're, doing things safely and correctly. I've had a bunch of patients who've come in who have been diagnosed with fatty liver disease doing keto. So again, it's healthy fat, not necessarily high fat. So we want to make sure we can eat a little bit more fat. We just want to make sure we're eating beneficial fat that's going to give us health benefit. Okay, drinks. Now, so often people don't think about what we're drinking. Okay, so this is a soda. Hopefully everybody can see it. This is just a regular 20-ounce Coke. Normally, I would ask everybody to guess how many of these sugar packets are in this soda. But today, I'm going to here's my little cup. So I'm just going to start counting, and I'm going to fill this cup up with how many sugar packets are in the soda. So this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, hope everyone's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. 26 packets of sugar in this soda. You may easily drink this, especially when it's 90 degrees outside. You think you're doing benefit, but you're actually drinking this many sugar packets, 26 packets of sugar that are in this soda. There's really no health benefit to that. There's no health benefit. That's pretty much all I can say about that. So we want to make sure we're focusing on water. We want to make sure seltzer water is okay as long as it's sodium free. The other thing is those Starbucks, not to call Starbucks out completely, but Dunkin' Donuts, all those fancy coffee drinks, those are going to also be loaded with added sugars. And sometimes people don't realize, I've had a couple of people who are like, I am not eating anything, but they're drinking 3 Starbucks coffees a day and they're gaining weight like crazy. So we really have to tap into what we're drinking, because sometimes we don't realize that what we're drinking has more calories. Even if we're eating fruits and vegetables, we're drinking all our calories in potentially high sugar drinks. Now, portion sizes. So these are just some portion sizes on the slide, but we really need to start measuring and looking at nutrition facts labels that give portion sizes. But this is, so here, I hope everyone can see this. This is a quarter, a third, a half, and 1 cup servings. And normally I'd have people guess how much a serving of pasta is, not necessarily how much you would eat of pasta. Now this is going to be cooked pasta. So, and I'm just going to tell you because it's actually a third of a cup is a serving. So 1 cup is actually 3 servings of pasta or 3 servings of rice. And this 1 cup actually fits into the quarter of our plate. So if you're not really a measuring cup kind of person, that's absolutely fine. But as long as we're limiting what we're doing when we're using the plate method, which is fine, and that's that quarter of the plate here. Okay, we really don't want any more of that as far as pasta or rice or any other carbohydrate. Okay, so to summarize, we want to eat at least 6 servings of vegetables a day. Again, we want to push back to that plant-based diet. We want to make sure that this side of our plate is always filled with vegetables. This can be, vegetables and salad. This could be 2 different vegetables. I don't really care how you do it, as long as this whole plate is filled with different vegetables of different colors. We want to have 2 to 3 servings of fruit a day. I really like to limit it to about 3 a day because sometimes we can go too much with the fruit. Fruit is definitely healthy for us. And I want to also point out, we don't want to juice these things because what's so important about fruits and vegetables is the fiber. We don't have the enzyme in our belly to break fiber down. So it's really important that we eat that, because what happens is it actually exercises the walls of our GI tract. It also gives us a lot of health benefits. So when we juice things, like when we juice the vegetables and the fruit, it's actually pureeing that fiber and then it's taking all the work away from our body doing it. So we want to make sure we are definitely increasing and actually eating the fiber. Dairy, if you are going to eat dairy, I know a lot of people don't like dairy, and that's absolutely fine. If you feel better when you eliminate dairy from your diet, that's absolutely fine. But if you are going to include dairy in your diet, we want to make sure that it's non-fat dairy. Dairy can be a source of a lot of extra calories. Dairy also has a lot of good probiotics in it, and active cultures like a Greek non-fat yogurt is a great breakfast. But whatever you do use, you want to make sure it's non-fat, whether it's milk, whether it's yogurt, we just want to make sure it's non-fat. We want to, like I said, reduce the red meat to once a week or less would be optimal. Chicken, about twice a week is fine for the chicken. Now fish, we want to increase to at least 3 times a week. We want to increase our fish intake. Again, and the breads and the grains, we want to focus on the fiber with the grains. We want to focus and make sure that everything we're eating is higher in fiber. And we really need to look at those nutrition facts label to make sure that, your bread should have at least 5 grams of fiber or more. Your cereal should have 8 grams of fiber or more. And that's really what we want to look at. But also, again, we want to kind of make sure we're limiting it to the quarter of our plate. So fats and nuts, we want to use the healthy fats like I said before. Nuts are a great source of healthy fat as well as a great snack. We want to limit it though, and then we want to increase the vegetarian sources into our diet of at least maybe 2 or 3 beans are great. You can throw them into your salad. You can have maybe a vegetarian meal for a couple of times a week. Would be great. So the secret is, I always say, people come into my office and they're like, okay, what is it? What's the secret? And I've decided it's the 4 F's, really. We need that fiber, like I said before. A high fiber diet is key to helping our gut and all that good gut bacteria. We want to make sure we're eating a high fiber, lots of fruits and vegetables, and pushing back towards that plant-based diet, having our plate half. But as we increase the fiber in our diet, we absolutely have to increase the fluid in our diet, because we increase the fiber without increasing the fluid, it's like putting cement into our GI tract. So we have to make sure we're doing both. And fitness and flexibility. Fitness is like we talked about exercise, and it's really, really important that we do add that exercise in, but flexibility is something a little bit different. And we want to make sure we can be very fit, but we also want to still be able to touch our toes. So we may want to just increase some yoga or some other flexibility in there. And then so there's a couple of things that were sent to you in the email. There's 2 recipes. This is a classic Greek salad, as well as a bean salad, which is coming next. And also there's a shopping list that was included in that email to you. And that's from a great website called Olive Tomato. That website is written by a Greek dietitian. It's all about the Mediterranean diet. It has recipes, it has great pictures. So it has some different options. But it has I like the shopping list because it kind of really makes us focus in on what's important and buying at the store. And then these are just a couple of other little fun slides that I added in there. The 9 best foods for weight loss is the magic food you're looking for does not exist. And also the best abs exercise is 5 sets of stop eating so much crap. Any questions?
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There were a couple of questions that came up in the chat. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and then I will ask Christina. So the first question is from Susan, and she is interested in how dairy affects inflammation.
So that's really an individual thing, and there's really no research that supports that clinically. I know there are people who say definitely does affect that, but it's really more of the only way we can really kind of tell if it's going to affect you individually, if you have a sensitivity to that, is by cutting it out of your diet. If you cut it out of your diet and you feel better, then absolutely you have a sensitivity to it. If you are lactose or you have an allergy, that's different. But to really figure out if you have a sensitivity as far as inflammation goes, would really be the only way is to cut it out of your diet and see it if you feel better. Dairy should always, like I said, be non-fat, but it's hard to say definitely it's going to affect inflammation because everyone is different and it's going to affect everyone differently.
Thank you. So there's another question about dairy.
Okay.
I thought reducing fat in dairy leads to higher sugar, so it's best to eat full fat in smaller quantities.
So I know that question's coming from like when we eat non-fat or when they start taking things out of products, they always put like salt and sugar back in on the back end. If you're, there's with yogurt and things like that, they're not going to be adding back in the sugar to it. It still has the lactose, which is the milk sugar. We're not going to take that out unless they're saying they're taking that out. It's not really increasing the sugar intake per se. If you're, no one should be drinking like gallons and gallons of milk because it's sources of lots of extra calories for starters. But if you're eating it in moderation, it's absolutely fine. I mean, if you want to use the full fat and eat it in less moderation, that's fine as well. It's really kind of a fine line of how you manage it, but it's not going to be increasing the sugar in your diet, no.
Okay, switching from sugar to salt. The question is, how important is it to use iodized salt versus sea salt?
Okay. Well, if you're going to use salt, I would definitely use it because that's the only way we really get iodine from the iodized. Sea salt is just salt. So it's not, I know they have a lot of health benefits out there about this sea salt. It's really not going to give us any more benefit, salt to salt. So if you're going to use a little bit of salt, you can use the kosher salt. You can use a regular salt is fine. It's not really going to give you any benefit either way. You really should try to eliminate it as much as possible, honestly.
Okay. Next question. Is whole grain pasta better for you? Yeah,
that's a good question. You have to really look at that nutrition facts label. Lots of things are labeled whole grain, and yes, that would be a better choice for the pasta as long as it has fiber on the nutrition facts label. So when you're looking at that nutrition facts label, if it says whole grain, but then yet there's no fiber, when you look underneath the total carbohydrate, it should have the fiber. If there's no fiber listed, if it's still only 2 or 0, then it's really not all that great. That should have higher, like at least maybe 3 or 4, and there's different brands that might have protein 2 in there. That's a better choice, but you still have to limit the portion size. It's not that we can just eat it, it still has to be that quarter of our plate.
Okay. Does cutting out gluten reduce inflammation?
Well, that is a very hot button topic. That is an individual thing. That is that's one of those things like with dairy. If there's no research to support that gluten feeds inflammation individually, but there are people who cut it out and they feel 100 times better. So if you have a sensitivity to it, absolutely it would be beneficial for you to cut it out. You can get a celiac test. Well, that is one of the big tests that tests for a gluten sensitivity or allergy. And that is definitely one of the products. If we think we're going to go gluten-free because we think it's going to be healthier for us, when we eat all those gluten-free products, they are actually adding salt and sugar on the back end. So it's not a healthier diet. Unless you have a true sensitivity or an allergy to cutting out gluten, it's not doing you any benefit to go gluten-free. Unless you do cut it out and you feel better, then, I can't argue with that. But if you don't have a sensitivity to it, just to eat gluten-free is definitely not giving you health benefit.
Okay, there's a question about dairy substitutes. And do they have any nutritional benefits, something like oat milk or almond milk?
Yeah, well, almond milk, is actually considered very expensive water in the nutrition world, because in 1 cup of almond milk, you have about 4 or 3 almonds. So it's really just mostly water. But oat milk is absolutely, soy milk, any of the other alternatives are fine, as long as, 1, they're non-fat, and if you're going to have them with calcium fortified. If you can get one that's calcium fortified, so you're getting the benefit from it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are sweet potatoes better for you than white potatoes?
Yeah, anything that has the color, the pigment to it is definitely going to give us a little bit more benefit. I do feel sorry for the poor potato. It gets a bum rap, but as long as you're not eating potatoes every single day, and definitely sweet potatoes are going to give us a little bit more benefit because of the color, the pigment to it is going to give us a little more nutrients. But I kind of feel bad for the regular potato though too. So you can eat both.
So I have a question about these plant-based meat substitutes that are out. I recently tried a brand called Impossible Foods.
Okay.
And it was quite tasty. And as I understand it, there's you're helping the environment by not eating meat. Again, I guess that counts as vegetarian. Curious your take on now when you look in the supermarket, there are at least half a dozen brands of these plant-based proteins.
Right. That's you have to really look at the nutrition facts label and look at the ingredients of what you're eating, because of course there's going to be better, like there's the Beyond Burger, there's regular veggie burgers, Trader Joe's has their own, everybody has their own brand. It's really looking at the nutrition facts label of it and reading the ingredients, and just making sure that there's not a lot of added sugars or a lot of salt to them. That's the big thing you want to look at. And they're great. And they're, as long as we're eating a healthier version, and really it's really the only way is kind of by reading that nutrition facts label is really what's going to determine, which one is the healthier choice, if that answers your question.
Yes, I believe that this brand, I think, does have a lot of salt in it to add flavor to it. So.
Right. So that's like a catch-22 right there. Right. So if you can, that's a tough one.
Right. Okay, last call for questions. All right. Well, thank you again. This was really interesting.
I think someone has a question.
Oh. Yeah, I couldn't get it into the group chat. I don't know why. I have 2 things. One, you didn't talk about eggs at all.
Okay.
And the other thing is I didn't get any handouts like you were talking about. I don't know.
Okay.
Something about something was emailed to us.
Yes, I emailed it to everyone. I can, if you put your email, oh, you can't do the chat. I'll go back through and make sure that your email was on there, but I had sent it to everybody.
Okay,
Okay.
so eggs.
Eggs. So eggs are a great source of protein. They're a complete protein. All the thing we need to know in the fat and the cholesterol is in the yolk of the egg. So I tend to encourage egg whites because that's more of the protein. If you're going to eat a full egg, you might want to do 1 whole egg with maybe 2 egg whites. If you can just do the egg whites would be preferably better because like I said, all the fat and the cholesterol is in the yolk of the egg. But the egg whites are absolutely fine to eat. I know some people do limit them, and if you are going to eat the whole egg, then yes, that's a higher source of cholesterol. But if you're just doing
doesn't it also have iron in that part of the egg rather than in the albumin?
Yeah, yes, and if that's what you're looking for, I mean, whenever we, if we're looking for iron, we want to make sure that it's coming from an animal base, but the egg is not going to be the best source of iron. If you really need iron, we need something that's going to have a red, like a red blood cell in it, because the red blood cell has the heme group, and that's where we're going to get the iron from. So if we're talking about an iron source, that's a little bit different than a protein source.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
There is a question about granola. What are your thoughts about granola?
A lot of fat in granola. I think that it's unfortunately, granola is a great snack. It's a great nutrient dense snack, especially if you're going to be hiking or you're going to need something to take with you on the everyday basis. Granola can be a lot of extra calorically dense. And so we have to watch portion size on that. So it could be a lot. It's a great travel, like, especially if you're hiking or you're going to be out doing a lot of extensive exercise or you're not going to be able to eat. So it's a great way to bring a bunch of calories with you in a small way. But to eat it every single day, it might be too much calories.
Okay, great. I think we're about done here. So let me just mention that, so if you can't find the handout in your email, feel free to send an email to the reference account that you signed up for, and we'll make sure to get you another copy of the handout. Okay,
great.
Christina, thank you again.
All right, thank you. All right, good luck with the rest of your series.
Thank you.
Thanks, all right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.